Thomas, after 22 years at Technova, we are restructuring her position. The words came out of Bradley Wellington III's mouth as naturally as someone ordering a coffee without sugar. He was sitting there in the company's executive restaurant, cutting a $40 grilled salmon while destroying my career between forkfuls. It was 12:17 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. The same time, 2 decades earlier, that I had presented the first prototype of the quantum core system that transformed our small startup into one of the largest digital infrastructure companies in the country. I understand that this may be unexpected, Bradley continued, without looking up from his plate. But Dad, the CEO, believes we need new blood in technical leadership. New blood. At 53, I was considered outdated by the 28-year-old kid who barely knew the difference between a server and a printer when he started working here 6 months ago. My name is Thomas Mitchell, and at that moment, watching my boss's spoiled son chew my future with hollandaise sauce, I knew my life was about to change forever. You have 2 weeks to organize the transition, Bradley announced, finally looking at me. His blue eyes carried that peculiar arrogance of someone who has never had to build anything in his life. I'll be taking over supervision of Quantum Core personally. I have some innovative ideas for modernizing the system. Innovative. The kid who 3 months ago asked if blockchain was a new type of Lego now had innovative ideas for the system I had designed line by line. I kept my expression neutral as he continued to talk about vision and technological disruption. Empty buzzwords he had learned in his MBA bought with his father's fortune. I didn't show anger, I didn't protest, I didn't beg. I just nodded politely. Sure, Bradley. I'll make the transition as smooth as possible. A satisfied smile crossed his face. He was probably expecting tears, despair, maybe a dramatic scene he could tell his friends about at happy hour. Instead, he found only a mature man graciously accepting his forced retirement. What Bradley didn't know, what no one at Technova knew, was that 22 years ago, when I signed the first Quantum Core contracts, I wasn't Thomas Mitchell, company employee. I was Thomas J. Mitchell, owner of Mitchell Technologies LLC, a small company that had developed a revolutionary quantum encryption system. A system that, according to documents that were never reviewed by the current legal team, still belonged exclusively to me. While Bradley talked about his grand plans to optimize my 2 decades of work, I silently did the math. Quantum Core currently processed 70% of all secure financial transactions on the East Coast. Federal contracts, international banks, national security agencies, they all depended on the architecture I had created. And all of those contracts, worth approximately $500 million in annual licensing fees, were about to discover a very interesting clause buried in the original documentation. Well, I said, standing up and extending my hand, it's been a pleasure working with you, Bradley. He shook my hand with that overly firm grip that insecure men use to compensate for other deficiencies. The pleasure was all mine, Thomas. I'm sure you'll find something suitable for your age. I walked calmly toward the exit, my steps measured and confident. In the elevator, when the doors closed, I allowed myself a small smile. If you're enjoying this story of how arrogance can be very costly, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how my humiliating dismissal turned into the most spectacular fall Technova has ever witnessed. Because while Bradley was celebrating his easy victory over old Thomas, he had no idea that he had just signed his own company's death warrant. And I had exactly 2 weeks to execute the most elegant plan of my career. 2 hours after that disastrous lunch, I was sitting at my desk watching Bradley Wellington III in action for the first time as my replacement. He had called an emergency meeting with the entire senior technical team, not including me of course, to present his revolutionary vision for the future of Quantum Core. Bradley wasn't just arrogant, he was dangerously incompetent masquerading as innovation. At 28, the only son of CEO Harold Wellington II, he had spent the last 6 years finding himself at European universities, backpacking through Asia, and earning 2 consecutive MBAs, one from Stanford, the other from Harvard, paid for entirely by Daddy. His professional experience consisted of 6 months as a strategic consultant at a venture capital firm that, coincidentally, also belonged to the Wellington family. Before that, 3 years managing a meditation app startup that went spectacularly bankrupt after burning through $2 million on expanded consciousness research retreats in Tibet. And now he was in charge of Technova's most critical system. Guys, I know you're used to Thomas's traditional approach, Bradley began, gesturing with a $15 iced coffee. But it's time to think outside the box. Quantum Core is amazing, but it's stuck in last century's paradigms. Last century's paradigms. The system had been developed just 5 years ago and was still considered revolutionary by the entire industry. My first initiative, he continued, clearly reading from notes prepared by some assistant, is to implement emotional artificial intelligence into the encryption core. Imagine a system that not only protects data, but understands the emotional state of users and adapts its security protocols accordingly. The silence in the room was deafening. I saw Jennifer Martinez, our lead cybersecurity expert for 15 years, cover her face with her hands. Robert Chun, our systems architecture expert, was clearly calculating how long it would take him to find a new job. With all due respect, Bradley, Jennifer finally said, her voice controlled but tense, quantum encryption systems don't work that way. It's not possible to interpret emotions through security protocols. Bradley smiled with that condescension specific to men who have never been questioned in their lives. Jennifer, this resistance to change is exactly what I'm talking about. You're stuck in limiting mindsets. I've researched this extensively during my MBA. There's a company in Tel Aviv that's developing something similar. I knew the Tel Aviv company. They developed chatbots for customer service, not military encryption systems. Bradley had clearly confused two completely different things and was convinced he was a visionary. But the worst was yet to come. In addition, Bradley announced, opening a pink folder, I've already approved a new external consulting contract to accelerate these changes. Synergy Solutions will be responsible for auditing all legacy code and implementing the necessary optimizations. Synergy Solutions. A consulting firm known for charging exorbitant prices for generic solutions that rarely worked. More importantly, a company that did not have security clearance to access confidential federal systems. Bradley, Robert Chen interrupted, his voice carrying 20 years of technical patience, the quantum core code is classified as National Security Level 3. Outside companies can't. I've already taken care of that, Bradley cut in, waving his hand dismissively. Dad, the CEO, is already talking to the right people in the government to get the special authorizations. It's all about politics, not technical competence. Politics, not technical competence. That phrase perfectly summed up Bradley Wellington III's philosophy of life. As I watched this disaster unfold, I began to understand the full magnitude of what was happening. It wasn't just my dismissal. It was the systematic dismantling of everything I had built, carried out by someone who didn't understand even the basic concepts of what he was destroying. Quantum Core processed transactions for 17 federal banks, 43 international financial institutions, and 8 national security agencies. One mistake, one security breach, one vulnerability created by incompetent consultants, and the consequences would be catastrophic. But Bradley was more concerned with impressing Daddy with disruption and innovation than with the literal responsibility of keeping the country's financial infrastructure running. 3 days after the disastrous meeting, I got a call from David Park, Chief Technology Officer at First National Bank, our largest client. Thomas, I need to talk to you urgently. We're getting strange reports about unauthorized changes to the Quantum Core authentication protocol. Did you authorize any updates last week? My blood ran cold. What kind of changes, David? Our systems are detecting attempts to integrate with unrecognized APIs. Something related to sentiment analysis? Does that make any sense to you? Bradley had actually done it. He had authorized modifications to the live system, without testing, without security approval, without understanding that he was messing with critical national infrastructure. David, you need to log out immediately. These are not authorized changes. Jesus, Thomas. If this affects our operations. I know. Give me 48 hours. 48 hours to save not only my reputation, but potentially the financial stability of millions of people. While Bradley was probably celebrating his first implemented innovation, he had no idea that he had just committed an act of criminal negligence that could result in a federal investigation. And I had less than 2 days to decide whether to save the company that fired me or let the consequences of Bradley's own actions destroy it naturally. The choice, I realized at that moment, was between being an anonymous hero or witnessing a lesson in poetic justice on a national scale. But there was still a third option that Bradley, in his infinite arrogance, could never see coming. 48 hours turned into 72. Then into a full week of frantic phone calls, emergency meetings, and sleepless nights trying to contain the disaster Bradley had unleashed. The sentiment analysis he had so proudly implemented wasn't just a bad idea. It was a massive security vulnerability that was compromising the entire quantum core network. On Monday, I got 5 calls before 9 in the morning. First National Bank, Goldman Sachs Regional, Treasury Federal Credit Union, Pentagon Federal, and the scariest of all, a direct call from the Department of Homeland Security. Mr. Mitchell, the voice was formal, controlled. This is Agent Lisa Rodriguez from the Cybercrimes Division. We need to talk about anomalies detected in the quantum core system over the last 72 hours. My stomach dropped. When the federal government calls about anomalies in national security systems, it's not to congratulate you on innovation. Sure, Agent Rodriguez. When would be convenient? Now. I'll be at Technova in 15 minutes. 15 minutes to decide whether I would save Bradley Wellington III from a federal investigation or let him face the consequences of his arrogant incompetence alone. I rushed to the executive floor, where I found Bradley in his new office, which coincidentally was my old office, talking animatedly on the phone about disrupting the digital security paradigm. "Bradley," I interrupted, knocking on the open door, "we need to talk. Now." He looked at me with that irritated expression of someone who is being bothered by minor issues. "Thomas, I thought you were organizing your transition. Shouldn't you be cleaning out your desk or something? The Department of Homeland Security is here in 10 minutes because of the modifications you made to Quantum Core." The color drained from Bradley's face. The phone slipped from his hand. That's not possible. The changes were approved by Dad. He said he had authorization. "Bradley, you implemented unverified third-party code into a Level 3 national security system. That's potentially a federal crime." For the first time since I've known him, I saw genuine fear in Bradley Wellington III's eyes. Not the performative worry of someone trying to impress Daddy, but real terror from someone who finally understood the magnitude of his own ignorance. "Thomas, you have to help me. You know the system better than anyone. You can fix this before they get here." Fix. As if 2 decades of work could be fixed in 10 minutes because of a week of irresponsible modifications. "Bradley, it's not a matter of fixing it. You've compromised the integrity of a system that processes classified information. Even if I reversed everything now, the logs already show that there have been unauthorized modifications. Then what do we do?" His voice was rising, panic evident. "We do nothing. You go down there, meet with Agent Rodriguez, and explain exactly what you implemented and why. You can't leave me alone in this. You were the technical lead. This is your responsibility too." There it was. The arrogance resurfacing even in the midst of desperation. Trying to turn his incompetence into my fault. "Bradley," my voice was icy now, "you fired me a week ago. Remember? You said I was legacy, that the company needed new blood. Now you're asking the old blood to clean up the new blood's mess." The elevator announced its arrival at the ground floor. Formal voices echoed in the lobby. "Thomas, please. I know I was, maybe a little harsh in our conversation. But you're not going to let the entire company go under because of a misunderstanding between us, are you?" A misunderstanding. My humiliating dismissal during lunch was a misunderstanding. Jennifer Martinez appeared at the door, her face pale, with Robert Chen right behind her. "Thomas, thank God you're still here," Jennifer whispered. "There are federal agents in the lobby asking about quantum core security protocols. No one knows what to say." "What about Harold?" I asked, referring to the CEO, Bradley's father. "He's at a conference in San Francisco. He won't be back until Thursday," Robert replied. "Thomas, you need to go down there. You're the only person who really understands the system architecture." I looked at Bradley, who was visibly sweating now. Then at Jennifer and Robert, 2 of the best engineers I'd ever met, clearly terrified of what could happen not only to their careers, but to their freedom if they were found to be complicit in a breach of national security. And it was at that moment that the third option, the one Bradley could never see, crystallized in my mind. "Jennifer, Robert, you can start gathering all the original technical documentation for Quantum Core. Development logs, architecture specifications, everything from the beginning. Agent Rodriguez will want it." "What about you, Thomas?" Jennifer asked. "I'm going down to talk to her. I'll explain exactly what happened when it happened, and who was responsible for every modification. Bradley grabbed my arm as I passed him. Thomas, you can't throw me under the bus like this. I stopped and turned to face him directly. Bradley, you got on the bus and started the engine. I'm just going to explain to the federal agents how you got there. When I arrived in the lobby, Agent Rodriguez was exactly what I expected. Dark suit, military posture, expression that revealed nothing but absolute professional competence. Mr. Mitchell? I'm Agent Rodriguez. I understand you were the lead architect of the quantum core system. I was. Until last week. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Until last week. I was fired on Monday. Officially, it was restructuring. In practice, the CEO's son wanted to take my position. And this son of the CEO implemented the modifications we detected? Yes. Against all security protocols, without technical approval, using outside consultants without proper clearance. Agent Rodriguez made some notes. Mr. Mitchell, I'll be blunt. The modifications we detected have created vulnerabilities that could be exploited by malicious actors to access classified information. This is potentially a violation of federal espionage laws. I understand completely, Agent Rodriguez. I would like to speak with the person responsible for these modifications. Bradley Wellington 3. He's on the 15th floor, most likely wondering how he's going to explain to his dad that he turned the family business into a federal investigation. For a moment, almost imperceptibly, I saw a trace of a smile on the agent's lips. And you, Mr. Mitchell, would you be willing to cooperate with our investigation? Completely. In fact, I'd like to discuss something important about Quantum Core's intellectual property that may be relevant to your investigation. Intellectual property? Yes. There are aspects of the property rights that Technova may not have adequately communicated. Aspects that directly affect who has legal authority to modify the system. Agent Rodriguez closed her notebook and studied me intently. Mr. Mitchell, I have a feeling this conversation is going to be much more interesting than I imagined. As we rode the elevator up to the 15th floor, where Bradley was probably having a panic attack, I felt a strange calm settle over me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't a thirst for revenge. It was something much more powerful. It was the moment to finally reveal the truth I had kept hidden for 22 years. The truth that would transform Bradley Wellington III from arrogant heir to federal defendant, and put me back in control of the system I had never really lost. Because while Bradley thought he had fired me, he didn't know he had just fired the only man who could save him from the consequences of his own stupidity. And now it was too late to turn back. The meeting with Agent Rodriguez lasted 3 hours. When we left Bradley's office, he was gone. According to Jennifer, he had left to take care of some urgent business with his father, translation, run home crying. But the conversation with the federal agents was only the first move. The real game began on Thursday, when Harold Wellington II returned from San Francisco. At 8 in the morning, my phone rang. Thomas, I need to see you. Now. The CEO's voice was tense, almost pleading. We can work this out. We can talk like gentlemen. Sure, Harold. But this time, let's talk at my house. Silence. Harold Wellington II, CEO of a $5 billion company, summoned to the home of a former employee. Thomas, you understand that this may look irregular? Harold, do you understand that your son has potentially committed a federal crime by tampering with a national security system? Irregularity is the least of our problems. He arrived at 10 sharp, driving himself instead of using the company driver. A sign that he wanted absolute discretion. Thomas, he began before even sitting down, we need to find a solution to this situation with Bradley. He's young, he made some mistakes in judgment, but... Harold, sit down. I'm going to show you something that will completely change our conversation. I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward him. On the screen was the original Quantum Core contract, dated 22 years ago. Thomas J. Mitchell, owner of Mitchell Technologies LLC, Harold read aloud, his voice growing progressively weaker. Exclusive licensing of the Quantum Core system. Keep reading, Harold. Clause 15.7. Ownership rights remain with Mitchell Technologies in perpetuity. Transfer of licensing may be revoked upon violation of security protocols, he stopped. He looked at me. Thomas, this means that Technova never owned Quantum Core. You've always been just a licensee. And according to this clause here, I pointed to the specific paragraph, any unauthorized modification of the system constitutes a breach of contract that allows for immediate revocation of the license. Harold's face drained of color. But that's not possible. Our lawyers reviewed everything when we bought your company. Harold, you never bought my company. You hired me as an employee and took a license on the system. Mitchell Technologies has always existed independently. He was silent for several long minutes, processing the information. What do you want, Thomas? I want you to understand the real situation. Your son has not only compromised national security, he has violated a $500 million annual contract. Every customer who uses Quantum Core, every bank, every federal agency, is technically operating under an illegal license right now. $500 million. That's how much Technova pays annually for the rights to use it. It's all documented in the contracts you signed, but apparently never read completely. Harold stood up and began pacing the room. Thomas, we've been partners for 2 decades. You're not going to destroy everything because of a misunderstanding with Bradley. This isn't a misunderstanding, Harold. Your son fired me at lunchtime, took over my project, implemented unauthorized modifications that compromised federal systems, and now there's a criminal investigation underway. He can apologize. We can reverse the modifications. We can give you your position back with a raise. Harold, you still don't get it. I'm no longer your employee asking for a favor. I'm the owner of a system that your company depends on completely. And after what happened, I no longer have confidence in Technova's ability to manage that responsibility. That's when I mentioned the call I had received on Tuesday. Cyberdyne Industries approached me. They're interested in an exclusive licensing agreement. Cyberdyne, Technova's biggest rival, a company that had been trying unsuccessfully for years to develop something equivalent to Quantum Core. Thomas, you can't be serious. Harold, last night I received a formal proposal. $550 million annually for 10 years, plus equity, plus a CTO position to personally oversee implementation. That's treason, Thomas. Treason was your son treating me like disposable trash after 22 years of building this company. Treason was implementing modifications that endangered national security out of sheer arrogance. Harold sat down heavily, his head in his hands. What do I need to do to get you not to sign with them? Harold, it's not about what you can do. It's about what Bradley did. And the consequences of those actions are already in motion. If you're following this story of how an arrogant firing can destroy an empire, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happened next was beyond anything Harold could have imagined. Thomas, give me one last chance. Let me fix this. Harold, you have 24 hours to decide whether you want to try to save what's left of Technova or watch her crumble when I transfer Quantum Core to those who truly understand its value. When Harold left my house, he was no longer the confident CEO I had known 2 decades ago. He was a man who finally understood that he had created a monster in his own son, and now that monster had destroyed everything they had built together. And as he drove back to face Bradley and try to save his company, I opened my email and began typing a response to Cyberdyne Industries. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's giving them exactly what they deserve and watching them destroy themselves. Friday, 9 in the morning. The Cyberdyne Industries office in Manhattan was everything Technova had pretended to be for years: elegant without being ostentatious, high-tech without being cold, professional without being corporate. Mr. Mitchell greeted Margaret Chun, CEO of Cyberdyne, with a firm handshake. It's an honor to finally meet you in person. Beside her stood 2 intellectual property lawyers and the company's chief technology officer, people who truly understood the value of what they were acquiring. The pleasure is mine, Margaret. Let's get right down to business. The contract was flawless. $550 million a year for 10 years, with an automatic renewal clause. CTO position with complete autonomy over the implementation of Quantum Core. And most importantly, total control over who could access or modify the system. As I reviewed the documents, my phone vibrated. Text message. Thomas, please don't do this. We can talk. Bradley is willing to apologize publicly. Harold. Too little, too late. I signed each page with the same calmness I had used to create the system 22 years ago. Margaret smiled and held out her hand again. Welcome to Cyberdyne, Thomas. It was 10:15 in the morning when the first bomb exploded. My phone rang before I even left the Cyberdyne building. Thomas. Harold's voice was almost unrecognizable. What have you done? Our main system is showing access denied on all quantum core functions. Harold, I warned you that you had 24 hours. But this is sabotage. You can't just shut down the system. Harold, I didn't shut down anything. I just revoked Technova's license as provided in the original contract. As of now, you are no longer authorized to operate Quantum Core. Silence. Then a noise that sounded like something breaking. Thomas, this will destroy the company. We have federal contracts that depend on this system. I know. And now you'll have to explain to your customers why you can no longer fulfill those contracts. At 11:30, the second wave hit. Jennifer Martinez called me, her voice tense. Thomas, there are FBI cars in the parking lot. They're going up to talk to Bradley. And our compliance team is running through the hallways with boxes of documents. Jennifer, you and Robert should seriously consider the offer Cyberdyne will be making to you in the next few hours. Thomas, did you plan all this? Jennifer, I planned to protect myself. The consequences are the result of Bradley's own actions. At noon, the third shock came like a tsunami. Harold Wellington II appeared at my door, unannounced, without calling. He was unrecognizable, disheveled hair, wrinkled suit, red eyes. Thomas, you have to stop this. The stock exchange has suspended trading of our shares. Our investors are panicking. The board is considering my removal. Come in, Harold. He threw himself into my chair like a defeated man. 25 years building Technova. 25 years, Thomas. Harold, you built Technova on top of my work. When that work was threatened by your son's incompetence, you didn't defend me. You fired me along with him. Bradley is young, he made mistakes. Harold, your son didn't make mistakes. He committed crimes. Unauthorized modifications to federal systems are not errors in judgment, they are violations of national security. Then Harold did something I had never seen him do in 2 decades, he cried. Thomas, I know I failed you. I know I should have defended your work. But please don't destroy everything because of Bradley's mistakes. Harold, I'm not destroying anything. I'm protecting my work from someone who has proven himself incapable of managing it responsibly. My phone rang. Private number. Hello. Mr. Mitchell, this is Agent Rodriguez. I need to inform you that Bradley Wellington III has been formally indicted for violating federal cybersecurity laws. The investigation is also examining possible violations of government contracts by Technova. Harold heard every word. When I hung up, he was looking at me with an expression I had never seen before, genuine fear. Thomas, is my son going to prison? Harold, your son could get 5 to 15 years for compromising national security systems. And Technova could lose all of its federal certifications. And you? Are you protected because you transferred the system? Harold, I've always been protected. Because I've always been the real owner. At 3 in the afternoon, the call I had been waiting for came. Thomas. Bradley's voice was broken, scared. Dad told me that you have control of Quantum Core. Is that true? Bradley, where are you? At the federal police station. They released me on bail, but... Thomas, I could go to prison. Federal prison. Because of the modifications I made to your system. In my system, Bradley. That was always the point. Thomas, I know I've been an idiot. I know I treated you badly. But you can't let me rot in prison because of a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Even facing federal charges, Bradley still called his criminal arrogance a misunderstanding. Bradley, there's nothing I can do. You modified a federal system without authorization. The consequences are now up to the courts. But you could testify that the modifications didn't cause any real harm. You could help. Bradley, you fired me at lunchtime like I was disposable trash. Why should I risk my credibility to help you? Silence. Then finally, the first honest admission I ever heard from Bradley Wellington III. Because I was wrong, Thomas. Completely wrong. Bradley, you were more than wrong. You were dangerous. And now the entire industry will know exactly the price of arrogance. When I hung up, Harold was still in my office, watching everything in silence. Thomas, is there anything you'll accept to reverse this? Harold, there is no reversal. Quantum Core now belongs to Cyberdyne. The federal investigation against Bradley will continue. And Technova will have to explain to its customers and investors how it lost the system that was the heart of the company. Harold stood up, walking toward the door like a man at a funeral. Thomas, I hope you can sleep at night knowing what you've done. Harold, my voice was firm, final, I sleep perfectly. For the first time in 22 years, I sleep knowing that my work is in competent hands. When the door closed, I picked up my phone and dialed Margaret Chun. Margaret? It's Thomas. When can I start? 6 months later, I was on the main stage at TechCon, the largest technology conference in the country. 3,000 people in the audience, live broadcast to 50 countries, and my presentation on the future of quantum cryptography had just received a 5-minute standing ovation. Questions. I offered into the microphone. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Mr. Mitchell, is it true that the quantum core system that revolutionized the industry was developed entirely by you, not Technova? The question everyone wanted to ask. The room fell silent. That's correct, I replied calmly. Quantum Core has always been owned by Mitchell Technologies. Technova operated under license, which was revoked when they violated national security protocols. A murmur rippled through the audience. In recent months, the story had become legend in the tech community. The case of the forgotten genius, who reclaimed his empire from an incompetent heir, and Bradley Wellington III. Mr. Wellington was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for cybersecurity violations, I replied without emotion. He is currently serving his sentence at Otisville Federal Penitentiary. 8 years. The judge had been clear, unauthorized modifications to national security systems were not juvenile mistakes, they were serious federal crimes. Bradley had tried the best lawyer his daddy's money could buy, but there is no legal defense for documented incompetence. Jennifer Martinez, now my vice president of security at Cyberdyne, found me backstage after the presentation. Thomas, I just got an interesting call, she said, smiling. Technova was officially sold today. Harold got $500 million, 10% of what it was worth a year ago. $500 million. The same amount as my annual contract with Cyberdyne. The irony was almost poetic. And Harold. Forced retirement. The board removed him last week. Officially, it was for strategic differences. In practice, it was for allowing his son to destroy the company. Harold Wellington II, after 25 years as CEO, had ended his career being escorted out of his own building by security guards. The headlines were brutal. CEO loses billions to nepotism, and when spoiled parents raise dangerous children. On my desk in my hotel room that night, I found a handwritten letter. Expensive stationery, shaky handwriting. Thomas. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I just wanted you to know that you were right about Bradley. I spoiled him so much that he never learned the difference between trust and competence. For years, I shielded him from the consequences of his actions, thinking I was being a good father. In reality, I was creating a monster who would eventually destroy everything we built together. You tried to warn me. You tried to save the company. You tried to protect the work we spent 2 decades building. And I chose my son over reason. Now he's in prison, I've lost everything, and you're where you always should have been, being recognized as the genius you really are. If it's any consolation, Bradley finally understood. He wrote to me from prison saying you were the only person who ever tried to teach him anything. That if he had listened to you instead of trying to humiliate him, he might have learned how to be a real man. Too late for us, but maybe it's not too late for him. Congratulations on your TechCon award. You deserve every word of praise. Harold Wellington 2-inch. I folded the letter carefully. I felt no anger, no satisfaction. Just a deep sadness for a man who had confused paternal love with destructive permissiveness. 2 weeks later, I was in my new house in Palo Alto, a house I had bought without looking at the price tag, something unthinkable in my days as a corporate employee, when I got an unexpected phone call. "Thomas? It's Bradley." My first reaction was to hang up. Then curiosity got the better of me. "Bradley, how did you get my number?" "My lawyer." "Thomas, I know you don't owe me anything. I know I ruined everything. But I need to talk to you." His voice was different. Lower, more mature. 8 months in federal prison had changed the arrogant boy I had known. 20 minutes on Tuesday, I offered. By video conference. On Tuesday, when the call connected, I was shocked. Bradley had lost weight, his hair was shorter, and for the first time since I had known him, his eyes didn't carry that irritating arrogance. "Thomas, I want to apologize. Not for the consequences, I deserve to be here. But for wasting the chance to learn from someone like you." "Bradley." "No, let me finish. I've spent the last few months reading about your career, your projects before Technova, your contributions to the industry. You weren't just an old, outdated employee. You were a pioneer that I was too arrogant to recognize." I was silent. In prison, there's a small library. I found a book on encryption systems from the 90s. It had an entire chapter on your pioneering work in quantum architecture. "Thomas, you were developing revolutionary concepts when I was still learning to tie my shoes." "Bradley, why are you telling me this?" "Because I spent 28 years of my life thinking that success was about who you know, not what you know. That privilege was power. That arrogance was leadership." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "You proved me completely wrong. And now, seeing where we've both ended up, I understand that you didn't destroy me. You just stopped protecting me from the consequences of my own choices." "Bradley, what do you want?" "Nothing, Thomas. Literally nothing. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand the difference between being the boss's son and being a true leader. And I wanted to thank you for teaching me that lesson, even though I was too arrogant to learn it at the time." When the call ended, I stared at the black screen for several minutes. For the first time in a year, I felt something close to peace. 3 months later, I was invited to be a keynote speaker at the Stanford MBA program, ironically, the same university where Bradley had learned about management. "The question you should be asking yourselves," I told the class of 200 future executives, "is not how to get power, but what to do with it when you get it." A familiar-looking young man in the third row raised his hand. Same confident posture, same arrogant smile Bradley had when I first met him. "Professor Mitchell, with all due respect, aren't networks and connections more important than technical competence in the real world of business?" The entire room tensed up. Clearly, everyone knew my story. "Young man, what's your name?" "Marcus Thompson III." "Of course. Another 3. "Marcus, let me tell you a story. A year ago, I met a young man just like you. Smart, confident, well-connected. He believed that privilege was permanent. Today, he is serving 8 years in federal prison because he confused networking with competence." Marcus swallowed hard. "The real question, Marcus, is, do you want to be remembered as someone who built something lasting, or as just another rich kid who wasted opportunities that others deserved more?" At the end of class, Marcus approached the stage. "Professor Mitchell, I'd like to learn more about quantum systems. I mean it." I smiled. Maybe not all privileged kids were lost. "Marcus, come to my office on Thursday. We'll start with the basics. And leave the arrogance at home." "Yes, sir." Today, 18 months after that humiliating lunch, I wake up every morning in my Palo Alto home, drive my Tesla to the Cyberdyne office, and lead a team of 50 of the best engineers in the country developing the next generation of quantum security. Bradley? He still has 6 years left in federal prison. Harold lost everything and lives modestly on his pension. Technova was broken up and sold off in pieces. And me? Well, last week I was named one of the 100 most influential people in technology by MIT Technology Review. If this story of how competence always wins out over privilege in the end touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories of poetic justice, clever revenge, and people who prove that true talent can never be silenced forever. Because at the end of the day, you can fire the person, but you can't fire the genius. And when genius decides to stop hiding behind modesty and start claiming what has always been rightfully hers, entire empires can crumble in a matter of months. The last time I heard about Bradley, he was teaching basic computer skills to other inmates. Me? I'm building the future of global digital security. Funny how life works, isn't it?